at planes of the face, and the purpose of this is to get us thinking about the face. Just like with the figure, we want to be thinking about it as a three-dimensional object with planes facing in different directions, meaning they catch different amounts of light. So three-dimensional object, light hitting it and creating areas of highlight, mid-tone and shadow. And by thinking of the face this way, it changes the way you draw it, even if you are just drawing with line work, even if you're just doing ink line work. Thinking of the head that you're drawing as a three-dimensional object protruding into space will change the way you draw it. And the biggest mistake made by people who are just starting out drawing is that they tend to draw the face as like a flat dinner plate with almond eyes, and everything looks kind of flat and weird. And that's because in their mind, they're not seeing the three-dimensional forms of the face when they're drawing on a two-dimensional surface. Now, we won't just be copying these drawings tonight, because I think that would be a waste of the time during the lesson. That's something that you can always do later. You can always pause the video and actually copy these out. And I would recommend doing that, because it's a good way just to get the forms into your head. But in the short time that we've got, I want to do something a bit more fun and a bit more different. So what we're going to be doing tonight is taking these, the planes of the face, these two images, and using them as a guideline to produce just a quick sketch of a more normal face. So something like this. So we're going to be sketching the line work first, and then we're going to be using the planes model as a guide to just put in some shadow and some highlights if you can, so that we can start seeing how we would use this tool to draw the face and to start modeling it as three-dimensional forms, not as a flat, flat surface. So we will start with just the front-on view. And yeah, I'll just take you through step by step the way I draw the face. So this class will be a little bit different in that we'll be going kind of step by step. So feel free to take your time and sort of just follow along. And hopefully we'll have enough time to get through both views. We'll see how we go. So when I draw the face front on like this, I usually start just by very lightly, if you're working in pencil, but just very lightly sketching in a horizontal line for the eye line and a vertical line down the center of that, just to mark the center of the face. I never really draw the outline of the head first too darkly, because I find that it's only once you've got the features of the face, the eyes, nose and mouth, that you really know how you want to model the actual shape of the head around that. Now with the eyes, roughly speaking, the eyes are usually one eye width apart. So my next step is usually just notch in that sort of one eye width apart on our line there. And then we can start actually sketching in the upper lid of the eye, keeping in mind that we want to sort of match that eye width throughout. You can always adjust that a bit later if you need to, and then we can do that over on the left eye as well. And then let's just complete underneath the lower lid. Sketching lightly with the lower lid. It doesn't need as much darkness because we're not catching as many eyelashes there. So, and then we can put in the iris. You want to go quite big with the iris, otherwise it's going to look like they're surprised or scared. And the pupil in the center of that. It's a fairly dead angle that we're doing for this first one, front on like this. It's, so it's a bit boring, but I think it's the first step that we need to do. And then usually if I'm sketching the face, I will then put in a darker line just to represent the fact that there are eyelashes. So I'm putting in a darker line at the top there. And you see when you do that, it stops the expression of the eyes looking, surprised, because we're not seeing as much of the iris on top. We've evolved to really scrutinize every detail of the face. That's why it's so difficult to draw faces. It's not because they're more complicated. It's just that we've evolved to scrutinize expressions of the face so intensely. We pay so much attention to it without even realizing. Now, we don't want to forget the upper and lower lids. So there's another line just above the eyelash line, and that's the upper lid, which I'm sketching in right now. So we want to just drop that in on both of them. Because once again, the eye is a three-dimensional form. It's a sphere and it's protruding. And so is the eyelid, so are the eyelids. And then we'll just put it, just a hint, not all the way around, but just a hint of the lower lid with these two lines. Now, when I'm drawing the nose, if it's front on like this, I don't usually draw both sides of it. I won't usually draw the highlight side. What I will do is draw it on the shadow side. And the nose is not a straight line as it is in the model. We want to have a little bump in the top half to represent the bone there. And then a little, a bit of roundness at the bottom. And we'll just put in some nostrils here. Roughly speaking, you'll notice that the outside of the nostril, once again, we're just talking generally here, every face is different and proportions vary a lot, obviously, but as a rough guideline, the edge of the nostril often lines up with the edge of the inside of the eye. So if I draw a straight line, I mean that there. But if you just imagine that instead, we can put in the outside of the nostril there. And same on the left side. And we're just going to be doing like a male face here. We'll assume it's a male face. And then I'll extend the sort of the brow area at the top on the shadow side up to where the eyebrow would be. On a male, usually the eyebrow's a bit lower, a bit closer to the eye. So I'm just going to sketch that a little bit closer. And then we can emulate, sort of copy that on the other side. And we can put some texture on that if we want to. All right. And we might just put a little soft line just to indicate the inside of the bridge of the nose on the highlight side. Something like that. All right. We've got eyes and nose there. Now we go down to the lip, and these two lines going from the sort of the base of the nose down to the lip give us a bit of a guideline to use there. So we might sort of sketch those in, but they're curved. They're more curved in reality than they are in the model on the left. And when I draw the mouth, I wouldn't usually draw the upper part of the lip. I would draw the actual line of the mouth first, especially when drawing males. Once again, if I draw on the model on the left, you'll see this as a rough guide. And sort of, if I draw down from the eyes, actually doesn't really work on this model, but sometimes you'll see as proportional guidelines, often the edge of the mouth will line up with the center of the pupil. Doesn't quite do it on this model. But it's a good rough guide to use. So when drawing the mouth, it's usually kind of, if it's just a neutral expression, an slightly upward line like that, a little dip in the middle, and down on the other side. We might put a little notch on the two ends just as a little crease. And then when drawing the male face, I will often just put in the shadow line under the lower lip and not actually really indicate the top lip in the line work if I'm going to be shading later. So put that in, and we might put some indication of the chin, which is going to be a highlight there. And then we can even put in the base of the chin. Yeah. All right. So with that, we can now sort of start modeling the actual shape of the head around that. So we want to look at the distance between the outside of the eye and the head there, and sort of, once again, just put a little notch to indicate that. And we've got the sort of the cheekbone there. And following the jaw around here. Getting proportions symmetrical on a front-on face like this can be challenging. One trick that I highly recommend when trying to draw the face is, if you're drawing traditional medium on paper or whatever, is holding it up to a mirror. If you're drawing digitally, then there's usually some tool you can use to flip the image, and that's a quick, useful way to check your proportions and symmetry. All right. Typically, there's a little indentation in around the temple, which we can indicate with a light line like so. Just going to very lightly sketch in the head because we might give this guy some hair in a minute. All right, so other little lines that you can use to indicate the forms of the face include something like this under the cheekbone. I might do it on the shadow side, that makes more sense first, but following those planes that we're looking at on the left there, we can put in something like that. It might be a little bit over, sorry. I might put that a bit closer to the side. We've got the lines going down from the outside of the nostrils down to the mouth, and all these vary depending on the age of the model. Okay, so let's put in the ears now. Drawing ears is kind of a lesson in itself, so I'm not going to go into that too much. So yeah, that really is a lesson in itself, and it's not actually that hard. Once you sort of draw a couple of ears and you look at the repeating patterns of the ears, it's quite simple. But for now, let's just do our best to copy from the model. Often ears will line up with the base of the nose, the earlobe, so that's something to keep in mind. All right, and if we want, we can drop in some hair here. So on a male model, we might just come down to around the midpoint of the ear, roughly, with some sideburns, and then curving around up here, and then back where the hairline recedes slightly. We won't give him an actual hair, we'll just give him like a shaved head type thing. And yeah, you'll notice this is sort of, I don't know about yours, but yeah, these will probably look a lot like those police police sketches at this point. All right, and put in the neck. Now, one thing about the neck is just notice a lot of people often draw the neck as concave lines. They do sort of this. The neck's not actually shaped like that. It's shaped of multiple convex lines. So I tend to sketch it as convex. And then we've got the trap muscles either side coming up to the neck like so. I guess we'll put in some details. I'm just going to shade the irises using little lines radiating out from the pupil. Now, because I'm working digitally, I can sort of erase stuff out, but you can do that with your eraser as well. So, I mean, you might want to just erase out a highlight on the highlight side, something like that. You can see how that works. And I would often sketch some darker, heavier lines under the chin, just to indicate that shadow there. And under the folds of the ear. And then we won't spend too much time on shading. It's something you can come back to when I post the video and maybe do in your own time. But I am just going to quickly drop a little bit of shadow in because that's kind of the point here. We want to use this model on the left to start to turn our drawing, to give our drawing the illusion of three-dimensional form protruding into space so that it's not just a flat face. And some of the line work stuff that we've already done kind of helps hint at that, but adding some shadow will help it even more. So I'm putting some shadow under the eyebrows here. That's usually the first spot that I find myself shading the face, and filling in the eyebrows so that they don't look weirdly light above the shadow. And I'm then doing the shadow, working on the shadow of the shadow side of the nose here. Now notice we don't necessarily emulate the exact shadowing on the model. This part has to become a bit more intuitive with practice. But I am using it as a guide. So now I'm putting in the dark shadow under the nose. And you can also put a dark shadow to now define the upper lip, which is a much better way of doing it than sort of drawing it in with a heavy line. Especially on a male model. Oops. So maybe there. And we can put some shadow in the lower lip and that dark spot between the lower lip and the bump of the chin. And we can also put some shadow under the shadow side cheekbone. And you can see now how our face is starting to take form. We can put the entire shadow side ear into a bit of shadow. And just hints of it in the highlight side ear. And then under the chin and the neck. And drop in some more shadow. And we might just give some darkness to his hair. And that's about it. There's more we could do here. I mean, we can go in and put in highlights and everything, but that's something you can just do in your own time using the planes as a guide. I'm putting a highlight on the bump of the chin here. I would often put a highlight on the highlight side nostril, like I've just done. And the side of the nose on the highlight side often catches quite a bit of light. Same with the highlight side cheekbone. And the temple on the highlight side. And yeah, that's probably about it. We should probably move on if we want to try get in the 3/4 view, which I would like to as well. So you can always add to this drawing later if you want to. All right, let's look at the 3/4 view. Okay. Drawing from a 3/4 view, once again, I want to get that sort of the eye line and the front and the center of the face line in as quickly as possible. But usually for this, I need some guideline for the shape of the head. So I've sketched very lightly because this will probably change. But I'm just sketching sort of a rough oval like this to indicate. That's a bit short. I'll just widen this a bit. Indicate the shape of the head. Usually I find that I need a bit of a guideline like that to get started with. And then with that, I can sort of put in this eye line. And now, because the model is facing to a 3/4 to the right, this front line is not going to be straight, it's going to be curved. We're going to have something like that. And you can see with those two lines that we've already got an indication of which way he's facing. And same as before, we want to get the eyes in first. Now, because of the view here, if we assume that the center line or just to the right of it is where the bridge of the nose is, we can start the eye right there. So you can see what I'm doing there. It's foreshortened because of the angle. And then with much more distance to the left, we've got the other eye. And let's follow the same sort of procedure that we did before. Getting these eyes in first. The upper lids of the eyes. Referring to the planes model, because you'll see how with the head turned like this, it affects the width of everything because of the foreshortening. Putting in the iris. My outside eye is probably a little too short. Just lengthen that a bit. All right. So now we're sort of, this 3/4 view, we're seeing the nose, you know, a bit of the profile of it. So once again, we can sketch in the shadow side of the brow here and put in the eyebrow above that. And then putting that in the left as well. Now, doing the nose, we might put a little indication of where the nose is going to end. And then using that, we can block it in, as I say, to bump for the bone there. And then coming out again for the base of the nose, tucking in to the shadow area there. And now we've seen the nostrils more in profile here, so it's a bit wider. And we would just catch a hint of the nostril on the shadow side, because it's mostly hidden by the protruding nose. And you see how this sort of changes everything, because we're thinking in terms of three-dimensional forms that are overlapping. Drawings that get really ugly if you start doing 3/4 views and everything, and you're still thinking in terms of flat and 2D. Putting in the pupils now, and a hint of dark line to indicate the eyelash above that. Okay, and Then we can put in the mouth as we did before, keeping in mind that once again, the side closest to us is elongated and the side wrapping around the shadow side of the head is foreshortened. Okay. I think I want to move straight on to getting the ear in. So that we just have to kind of do by sight. And if it helps, you can block in a little notch for the top of where the ear is and the base of it. And that'll help give you some guidelines so that you know what area you're working within. I hadn't thought of doing a class on drawing the ear, but we should do that. It's kind of it's worth doing. It's the sort of thing you only have to do. You only have to really learn it once. I mean, it helps to keep drawing it and practicing, but once you know the rough shape and lines, it's easy to remember. Okay, so now with that, we've got all the guidelines we need to actually put in the head. So I'm going to start with, on the shadow side, the underneath of the brow there. And that's protruding, and I'm going to extend the eyebrow to line up with that. Right above the head, it doesn't show on the model, but usually there's a little lump just above the brow, so that usually comes in a bit like that, and then straightens out again for the forehead. All right, and then going from the edge of the eye on the shadow side, we've got the cheekbone, which is more pronounced now because we're at this 3/4 angle. That usually tucks in towards the nose, and then when you get down to the mouth, usually there's a slight sort of fleshy lump there, sort of lining up with the edge of the mouth, and then coming down to the chin here. And that's sort of lump of the chin there. Just fixing up the forehead on my guy was a bit set back a bit. All right, so the jaw usually connects and tucks into underneath the ear, so it's not as per my guideline there, which that's why I said we sketch that lightly because it's going to change. So usually we come down like so for the jaw, something like that. Doesn't have to be quite that pronounced. All right. We are running out of time, but I think we've got enough time to finish this. So we can put in the neck. Once again, you'll notice my neckline is convex, not concave. And a trap muscle coming off of that. The 3/4, the chin is now protruding, so the outside of the neck comes down around the middle of the chin there. And the trap muscle tucking in behind that. I won't get into the neck too much here, but there's sort of front lines there indicating that sternomastoid runs down the front of the neck. We'll just sort of indicate that lightly. Now I'll put a bit of hair on this guy again, so we can sort of look at the, I don't know, a rough shape of the hairline here, which sort of curves over the top of the brow like that, and then if it's receding at all, it sort of cuts back there. Just extend the size of his head a bit here to indicate that he's got a bit of hair. And as before, we can put in some lines that indicate the three-dimensional planes, like the lines from the outside of the nostril down to the mouth. They could just be light if the model's not too old. A little crease at the edges of the mouth, and the curved lines that run from the bridge of the nose down to the upper lip. Curved slightly more accentuated in this three-quarter view. And we don't want to forget the lower lids. Puts a little crease under the eye. And we can put in a little shadow line under the cheekbone on the highlight side here. Something like that. And yeah, that's about does us for the drawing part of it. We can put in some shadow if we've got time. As I say, I usually start with the under the eyebrows. That area. Notice the upper part of the eyelid is catching the light because it's an more upward facing plane. And the shadow side of the nose here, and the shadow would sort of tuck under the protruding lower lid. And we've got the shadow under the nose. And that little ridge that runs down to the lip would actually block some of the light, so often there's a little shadow right there as well. And we want to make this make sense tonally, we might want to just fill in the iris of the eyes. And I'm going to give him some tone to his hair. And the shadow under the lower lip, and we can put in some of the shadow of the upper lip because it's a downward facing plane, that's why it's a bit darker. And some little shadows in the ear, and under the jaw. As the jaw curves away, it stops catching the light, casting that shadow there. And yeah, obviously there's a lot more we could do with the shadows here. Like it would be, you know, if we had more time, we could block in the whole shadow side of the face, which I'm just kind of hinting at there. But you get the idea. We can use these planes of the face on the left here to remind ourselves that these are simple three-dimensional planes that catch the light to different degrees. And it's important to keep that in mind when we're doing both the line work and obviously the shading and painting side of it. And if you can put in highlights, we can put in a few little highlights here. And on the outside of the nostril, the inside of the highlight side of the nose there, the top of the cheekbone, the temple, and the outside of the neck even. And I don't want us to get cut off, so I think I'm going to have to end it there. You can refer to the video later if you want to have a go at continuing with the drawings that you've done, but I do recommend also copying the planes of the face at some point because it will change the way that you see the face and it'll really help. And in a future lesson, we might now apply this and spend the whole lesson maybe just doing one view of the face. I've got a really good reference photo for that we could do. So we'll end it there. Thanks for taking part, and I hope you enjoyed. And as always, I'd love to see if you want to post any of your